Oh, man, no. It's one of the 23 commandments of war. Don't mix dairy and baby.
I'm Brodor, and this is Why We Game. Returning is Jason Brickhouse. Jason is a writer, a gamer, a martial artist, and sometimes parent. Jason's got a new book coming out called There I Was When Nothing Happened, which is about diffusing conflict. And today we're going to talk about relating conflict resolution and how to diffuse conflict safely and avoiding danger and applying that to your game. Jason, how are you?
Man, I'm really good. 2022 has been ridiculously busy. Started it going through COVID. The whole household got it. No hospitalizations. Most of it was like having a really bad cold. And also it felt like I had deep-throated a cheese grater.
Whoa.
But yeah, that was the most miserable part. But, we got through it without any hospitalizations or anything like that. Came out strong, and it's been a very busy, very crazy, very cool year so far.
Well, I don't want to get into a political thing because it's not what I do on this show. And, when I start asking questions about masking and vaxxing, people either start sharpening knives and lighting torches or they tune out. But I assume you're vaxxed and all that.
Yeah. Got both doses and the booster, and now I've had it. So I guess in Canada, the term they're using is super immune. Because we're triple vaxxed and we've had the disease, but apparently the symptoms were far less severe because I was vaxxed.
Yeah, I have taken the vaccine. I've gotten boosted, and I'm not telling people to not take the vaccine. I don't want to get into that. Don't fucking at me. But the sickest I have ever been in my recollection was Moderna shot number 2 and Moderna shot number 3. I felt like hell. Shot number 2, dude, I was done for a week, man. I was in miserable shape. The second one, it was still a week of waking up in the middle of the night more than once, drenched in sweat and what have you. Still miserable. And, when the Gestapo demands that I take shot number 4, I will, but because I'm a bitch. But anyway, I don't want to get into that because it's not what I do on this show. If people want to get to know you as a gamer and your background and why I'm interested in having you on the show, I will link that previous episode in the show notes. But today, really what we want to talk about are a couple of things that you're doing. One, in the conflict resolution / martial arts space and how we apply it to gaming. But 2, you have an adventure coming out for a game system that I want to play for a genre that I adore. But let's talk about the book first. So what, I don't know, I hate replicating other interviewers. Well, tell us about the book, Jason. Where did it come from? What inspired you to write this book? So how about this? What is the book, and as a gamer, why do I care?
Cool. Okay. So the book is, as we said, it's called There I Was When Nothing Happened. And where it comes from is martial arts is full of 1,000 ways to do something if somebody throws a punch at you. But we spend very, very, very little time on not being the kind of person who somebody wants to punch, and on conflict de-escalation skills, on avoiding the violence.
Keep going.
On avoiding violence. And so this book is a collection of anecdotes from bodyguards, police, firefighters, criminals, martial artists, of some pretty serious experience. I'm very, very happy about the quality of people who are contributing to this anthology. And they're all telling a story about a time that they avoided violence, whether that was through preparing for the trouble, situational awareness, de-escalating things through humor, avoiding injury through rapid flight. And we've got all these stories in a collection, and including some notes from each story about how other martial artists, how folks in general can apply those to their own lives to keep themselves and their loved ones safer.
All right. So how much of this was influenced by Rory's book, Conflict Communication. I know that he's been a guest on your show, and I don't want to say that he's a mentor, but certainly he's been an influence on you. So if I've read Rory's book, aside from anecdote, am I getting any kind of new insight from you or the participants?
Absolutely. Rory's book, Conflict Communication, is probably the book to read about avoiding violence in the de-escalation phase. However, we also, the book is structured in a way that I teach conflict de-escalation when I do seminars and whatnot, starting with preparation and then awareness and then avoidance and then de-escalation and then escape. And Rory's book focuses mostly on de-escalation and a little bit on awareness. And Rory, it's interesting that you mentioned Rory, because the book came about that on my show, Safest Family on the Block, which we talked about last time. I interview all of these violence professionals and safety professionals, and I was finding again and again and again and again that every time I sat down and talked to a stone badass, they were all about not getting into tussles. They knew how to win a fight, but they wanted to not fight. And after enough of those iterations of the same people going, yeah, don't punch people, don't do other things, I decided to gather these stories together. And it's like I said, I've got an amazing group of people involved. Rory Miller is contributing a story, other martial arts nerds out there. And it's interesting how many nerds and gamers are in martial arts. I've always found that kind of fascinating and cool. But if you're also a martial artist as well as a gamer, you're going to recognize the names of Rory Miller, John Sepulveda, Bob White, Lauren Christensen, Tony Blauer just came on. So we've got a lot of really, really experienced violence professionals who are talking about how to avoid violence, because the more you know violence, the less you want to be involved with it.
Well, and I would also say, and I don't want to speak for you, but for me, as a gamer and somebody who likes telling stories, the more I can understand the situation that leads up to the violence, I think the more interesting the violence is. And I think one of the things that to me, it gets boring about gaming is fights can become very same old, but also, players have a tendency to not recognize threats outside their range, but also they don't get to relish the power of being the bully and threats that are well beneath them. And really me as a game master doing a good job of cowering and trying to de-escalate, or me as the superior force trying to get them to back down and to be intimidating. So hearing stories like that and understanding the language, the body language and their narrative, I think is going to make me a better storyteller. But how are you thinking I should apply it, or that other gamers can or might want to apply it to their games?
So first of all, the more that we understand violence, the better we can portray violence in our games. We can make it more meaningful. As a bit of an aside, I have another writer friend, woman named Linda Mercury, who writes erotica. And she and I have ripped it several times. And we keep flirting around writing a book called Sex and Violence, about how really portraying either of those in fiction is the same skill, because you can describe the physicality of it, tab A into slot B, sword into gut. But if you just describe that, you get porn. And, porn is fun. And whether that's, the porn that you use while your wife's out of town, or whether that's watching, say, The Raid, which is just really good violence for 2 hours.
Wait, hold on.
That's fine.
Is this a movie, and what streaming service do I find it on?
The Raid. And the last time I watched it was on YouTube, and it's literally martial artist badass cop raids a project housing tower to get to a drug lord, and his team gets about halfway up when the drug lord gets on the PA and promises free rent for a year to whoever kills the cops, and then he has to fight his way out of the building. So it's
basically a more, I guess, a more urbanized version, more modern day version, I should say, of the Dredd movie, which I love.
Yes. Yeah. So imagine the Dredd movie, only it's martial arts porn.
Oh, okay.
Right. And it's got some great violence. Now,
is it an American drug house, or is this a foreign film?
No, it's set in Indonesia, in Jakarta.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's the last time I watched it was when I traded with my wife. She wanted to watch Dirty Dancing, and I'm like, I don't want to watch Dirty Dancing. She said, well, you're keeping on me to watch martial arts movies. I'm like, are we negotiating? And so we sat down and watched Dirty Dancing and then The Raid, and even she liked it. So it's really good.
Patrick Swayze was a dream. I think that
he was.
Patrick Swayze to me is like Rutger Hauer. That's just, I don't care I don't care what it is, or if it's a deliberate piece of garbage, you know, that they wanted to dust him off for. Dude, I'll see that movie. You want to give me, fuck, I mean, Point Break is one of my favorite movies of all time. I watch it once a year, every year, just because it's important to me to see Bodhi. Anyway, let's get back.
Well, Swayze with his shirt off confuses me sexually.
Yeah, well, for sure. I don't think there's, I mean, you know, I guess Kinsey was right.
Yeah.
Anyway, so back to
but we digress.
Back to the gaming topic. So you were applying this to gaming, and you know, how would I? So let's say I have a game store and I also sell books, and there are many of them out there. If this is a book that I was bringing into my store, and I do a lot of science fiction or fiction, you know, George R. Ham Sandwich Raper Martin, you know, that kind of stuff, but I want to have a section of real world books and things where to help inspire people to better their games, better their writing. If I wanted to put this in the hands of a stranger, what kind of, you know, what 2-sentence or 2-minute pitch am I going to give them about the book to help them apply it to their game?
So there's two pieces on that. One is, like we were talking about, violence porn and sex porn. That's good for some things, but sex and violence are better the more you understand the context of that. That the sex is part of the love story, or the sex is a revenge story where you're porking your enemy's wife, right? That's much more satisfying than just sex because the pizza boy showed up. Inigo Montoya, I want my father back, you son of a bitch, is so powerful because we understand the story and the context around it. So first of all, the better you understand violence, the dynamics around it, and build a story around your violence, that makes for better fiction and better games. And then from a more nuts and bolts standpoint, the book is built around 5 stages of avoiding violence. And it starts with preparation, goes to awareness, goes to avoidance, goes to de-escalation, and then finally to escape. And then each of these stages are opportunities for you as a person. Say you're at a bar, you're drinking with your friends, or you're traveling in Bangkok with your family. These are all stages at which you can avoid a violent confrontation. And there are also stages at which a game master can build in their encounters and their adventures and their campaigns so that the players can find other ways around the situation where, you know, the guard at the tower, you can go beat them up. Maybe you don't want to beat them up, or maybe you're bored with beating them up or whatever. So maybe you practice preparation by getting to know the aristocrat's wife who he's having an affair with, and so maybe you can blackmail him instead. Or maybe you're practicing your awareness by observing the situation for a while and finding out when the guard changes. Or that at 2 a.m. every night, that guard who's a bit of a fuck up goes and takes a crap in the backyard and leaves his post for 10 minutes. And then from there, there's avoidance. What are the ways to go around the situation? And then de-escalation, which is where you talk to them, you engage directly, and what are the skills, the persuasion, the deception, the distraction skills that might get there. And then finally, you know, there's escape, which doesn't really apply in this way too much, although maybe you have the rogue go parkour with him merrily on his heels while the rest of the party goes to the now unguarded door. But by understanding these stages of de-escalating conflict, you can then build encounters that give players more options and can make the game way more satisfying.
Also, and I think that especially in the current zeitgeist of more narrative style games that are mechanical light, what are the things that I'm spending time preparation on? And if I think about those 5 stages, preparation being the first, well, in order to prepare for the encounter, what skill sets are among the party so I can give spotlight to this 1 or 2 players so they can do preparation? Where does preparation maybe favor a skill set or something that I wasn't thinking about, right? So maybe there's something for the wizard to do in this situation in terms of, library research or whatever. So yeah, I think that if I consider all 5 stages and then add a second stage or add another stage at the end, a 6th stage, called violence, right? And then does the party have to escape because they're outnumbered, outgunned, outpowered, outclassed, or it's Cthulhu and it's just probably a good idea? Or do I go into my combat encounter? But if I follow the first 4 steps that then lead to the yes, no, fight, don't fight, I think that would be an interesting way for me to look at preparing games that isn't related to a mechanical wank like a 3-5 or doing a big number crunching to build monsters, which I just don't really enjoy anymore. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And one of the nice things that you can also do is you expand out a little bit and you're designing an adventure for the day, right? And even if it is, a nice number cruncher like Pathfinder or something, where you build your adventure, there's, say, 10 key locations or events in the adventure. And then you can use the same framework, all 5 of those steps and violence, and kind of pepper through it. So we're going to make it easy to get through this one at the preparation stage. This one's going to need a good fight, and then this one over here is going to need de-escalation, so that all the different player types and all the different competencies in your gaming group each get a spotlight, instead of what often happens, which is you wander merrily along, the rogue jumps over a pit trap, and then every single time it's the fighter and the paladin who get the most attention and fun.
It's absolutely true. But also, like, if I'm playing a paladin, well, even though statistically, right, with the mechanics of the game, my equipment, etc., I may be great at fighting, I feel like that I don't want to fight, particularly just being influenced by this conversation and thinking about sort of the warrior mindset and warrior culture. When you really do experience violence, it gives you a humility, because not only, and we talked about this on the episode that you were on previously, not only do you realize that you could endanger yourself, that somebody could get lucky, you could lose, you could make a mistake, whatever, and your life is in danger. D&D, that's not always really the case, but you don't want to hurt people. You see what hurting people does. You've been pinned down on the mat and felt helpless and been at the mercy of another person. And you don't want to visit that upon other people because it's gross.
Yeah. And then from a gaming perspective, think about Dan's game, Skies of Glass, that you guys have done that is a game where the last thing in the world you want is flying bullets, much like real life.
Right, because you'll die.
And so applying some of these things, whether it's with a game master standpoint or just as a player, having a new way to look at how you're going to address an encounter and have that own checklist with your own, all right, so let's see if we can do this and see if we can do this, and slow down the pressure, take the pressure off of the encounter so that it's less likely to go violent.
This book, I understand, is not yet available. Your Kickstarter goes live toward the end of this month.
Correct. We'll have the preview page up on February 15th. We'll go live on February 22nd. It'll run 3 weeks till March 17th. And then after that, we'll publish. We're looking at August for publication, and then it'll be up on Amazon and everything. But we're looking to make the Kickstarter a real splash and then get as much support for the book as possible. I really think that in the martial arts industry, we spend way too much time on the kicking and the punching, and not enough time on the not having to get kicked and punched at. And so this is kind of, I guess, my line in the sand, my banner about, hey guys, let's have this other conversation, which is way more important.
And that's a great trope in martial arts fiction and martial arts mythology. If you throw a punch, you've already lost the fight. The idea that peace should always come first. And in the real world, it's something, I mean, hell, you see it today with the current administration and the situation with Russia, et cetera, where they're still trying to pursue diplomacy because violence is very, very ugly. And sometimes I don't think we take the violence seriously enough in our games. And if we did, I think it would make the games more interesting, even if mechanically the violence is pretty one-sided in favor of the players, like in 5e.
And you're right, that there's that narrative of avoid violence, If you throw a punch, you've already lost. It's there, but in the martial arts industry, we often pay lip service to it. For example, I would be willing to bet, because martial arts is full of nerds and full of gamers, that there are a number of martial artists listening to this podcast right now. And I'll ask you, have you read The Art of War? And they would all be raising their hands right now. Have you read How to Make Friends and Influence People? They're not going to put their hands up much. How many have read Conflict Communication books? One of my favorite other example is, when was the last time you spent $200 to go take some kind of gun class or some kind of specialized advanced martial arts class? When was the last time you went and took a medical class or a class on mediation and active listening? So we pay lip service to this idea, but we don't put the time and energy into the training to support it. One person I interviewed, it might have been Rory Miller, was saying that the best self-defense class he'd taken in the last 10 years was he went and did an improv class. Because if you want to get better at thinking quick and coming up with that thing to say that'll defuse the situation, go do improv drama in front of 100 people, because it's going to get you faster on your feet.
Well, and again, I think that would be great just for game mastering in general.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I did a little bit of, speech and debate and that sort of malarkey in high school, and, a little bit of acting and blah, blah, blah. But I never did serious improv like that. Yeah, no, I would be terrified.
You talk a lot of martial arts about pressure testing your techniques, right? Where you can practice it on your own in front of the mirror 1,000 times and get all sharp and stuff. But as soon as an angry person is in front of you, it's an entirely different thing from a hormonal standpoint, a physiological standpoint. And so there's a lot of pressure testing techniques and drills you do so that you can, in theory, do that. But then we don't do that with the other more important skills, the paying attention in a crowded room, the how to respond to the guy who's like, "Hey, what you looking at, motherfucker?" kind of situation, right?
Why do you think that is? Yeah. I mean, I know that that's a much bigger question than my gaming podcast, but why is that? Why do we focus on the physicality of it and not the intellectual side?
I have my own theory, and then there's another theory that this has been around for a while. I can't remember where I first encountered it, but the reason that humans like sex, violence, and sports way disproportionately is that they're the only three places in the modern world where you're tested, where you get in a room with somebody else, you do your very best, and then you find out for real whether or not that best was good enough, whether you satisfy your partner, whether you're the one standing after a fight, whether your team wins. That feels very alpha male chest thumpy to me, but I think there may be a grain of truth to it.
Well, I think that we are hardwired to compete as much as society, technology, language, and how we interact with one another evolves. At our core, we're still animals, and we're still driven to compete and breed. And
those are three places where we still compete. A lot of the other experiences we have in the modern world, you don't have that kind of competition. And again, like I said, I've read it. I think there's a grain of truth. It feels very alpha male, very Jordan Peterson to me. My own theory is that we don't see real violence. Where and gaming and martial arts have this in common too, where they have this fantasy of violence that is satisfying and sanitized. Where you go take a seminar and we're talking about, so you turn him over this way, you strip the gun away, and you break his arm here, and you stomp on his nutsack, and all of that. But you're not actually breaking anybody's arm, and you're not actually stomping anybody's nutsack, and nobody's actually pointing a gun at you. And similarly, in the amazing amounts of violence that happen in role-playing games, but there's never a body to clean up later. There's never PTSD from the experience. And so we have this fantasy of violence, and it's, of course, exacerbated by our entertainment. And I'm not here to say, the press is bad, entertainment is bad. Oh, God, no. Human beings have been violent motherfuckers since well before mass media. But the violence that we experience and the violence that we imagine is sanitized and safe. And so we engage around that because it's fun. It's fun. A friend of mine used to refer to me as a karate pajama LARPer. That a lot of martial arts training is in some ways LARPing. At the time, I was young enough to be offended, but he wasn't entirely wrong.
I've completely turned around. I mean, I used to shit on LARPing communities, as one group a lot, and I was wrong, man. I've met some in my journeys. I've met some really, really great LARPers, and so I try to point out that they're good folk. Yeah.
Yeah, they're good humans. Like, I think that has a lot to do with it, though. And because it's that sanitized thing, it's just sexier and fun. It's way more fun to go practice gun disarms than it is to go and sit in a class about mediation.
It is, but there is something so titillating and almost wicked and indulgent about being able to move people with words.
Absolutely agreed. And it can be fun, although sometimes you start wondering if you're lawful evil or lawful good when you enjoy it that much.
Right. Or you ask people, I think I might be a sociopath, and they say, you asked that question, I wouldn't worry yet.
Yeah.
It's when you stop asking.
Exactly. Like one of my favorite martial arts victory stories at the time, I swear I almost talked a gangbanger into letting me shoot him. Right? And I enjoyed that a little too much.
That's messed up poop.
Yeah, the short version, I was dating an inappropriate woman when I was a second-degree black belt and a regionally competitive kickboxer.
Would you please define inappropriate woman?
I'll get right there right now. Okay. We were at a party that she wanted to go to, and she was running around this party that had some people who were kind of sketchy bragging about her martial artist badass boyfriend. So predictably, I've got a fucking gangbanger who's coming by. I hear you think you're a dangerous man. I'm not dangerous, man. I can take care of the people I care about, but I'm not a swinging dick. I mean, what's up? And he's just, he's trying to prove himself. He's some kid. He's like 21, 22, I'm guessing. And it's like, and the conversation gets to him saying, so tell me this, Mr. Karate Man Black Belt, can you block a bullet? And I'm like, fuck. And so what I do is I get completely nerdy. Like, well, I can't, man, but you won't believe this. The other day, my sensei was showing me how. Now I can't do it, but he can. And what you do is you will relax your body completely. And when you relax your body completely enough, when the bullet hits you, it'll turn your body instead of going into your body, and it'll hurt like hell, but the bullet won't go into you. And I was so nerdy and so harmless with it. Is the next thing I was asking was, for reals, man? I'm like, yeah, for reals. And I just keep nerding out about it. And I asked him to go get me a beer, and he was bringing me beer. And I swear to God, if my girlfriend hadn't made me leave, I would have been able to talk him into trying it.
And as a gamer, like I love that story, right? Because I want to have that moment where the PC has the ability to turn the NPC like that from enemy to asset. Yeah, exactly. And those kinds of stories, although our gaming doesn't make a lot of space for them, they can be great stories. Like that is still my favorite karate guy conflict story that I have in my toolbox. And we can create those in our fiction too. I'm sorry. Well, the way you said karate, I just immediately thought that I'm a karate man and that the rent is too damn high. Yeah. But maybe I might be too damn high. Who knows? You touched on something back there that I want to go back to and address, which was the post-fight, not just the trauma, but the cleanup. And you're right. You don't think about that. And I'm getting ready to run a Call of Cthulhu Savage Worlds 1953 freshman class of Miskatonic University, right? Nice. And all my players are forced to take 2 semesters in their first year of paranormal metaphysics. And it's a 6-hour course, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 2 hours on Monday, 2 hours on Wednesday, lab on Friday that starts at 8 a.m. My players were like, fuck you. One of my guys was like, dude, seriously, you made my nemesis right out of the gate. But any which way. When they have their first combat encounter, obviously it's not going to be against a mythos threat, right? It's going to be against another human being. And, maybe some of these kids can fight. Maybe they can't. I know 2 of the people in the party can, but one of the guys, he's a really nice kid. And I know he doesn't want to hurt anybody. And I know that player. So now when there actually is violence, right? If there is a busted lip, a broken nose, a shattered bone, I know that guy, I can apply that pressure to him because he's gonna feel guilty about it, right? And if I think about that kind of thing as a game master, that's a whole different, wonderful pressure level that I haven't applied in the past. Or the trauma of violence, God forbid they kill something or someone. Yeah. So yeah, that's stuff I'm gonna explore. And that cleanup, that cleanup is big. If you want just a very simple, very graphic representation, even if you're playing, say, D&D, when the players drop a monster, you don't remove the figure from the board. You knock it over, and now it's terrain, right? Just that one added thing, because we always just take the figure off, right? But 8 dead kobolds in front of your fighter are going to mean that he's going to have a hard time moving forward. I mean, just the smell of bodies that are expelling gases, of open wounds, particularly if something gets hit. I mean, you're most likely to get hit in the hips, abdomen, and thorax, right? So you're talking about innards getting spilled, right? So the steam of bodies and the cold and the smell of sweetbreads, right? That's stuff that we don't think about at the end of a fight. You're right. We just sweep off the board and move on.
So, there's logistical issues with violence. There's psychological issues with violence. If you're playing in a modern day campaign, there's the legal issues of violence, both in terms of a criminal proceeding and in terms of a civil suit. These are all things to deal with.
Just the physicality of how heavy an actually limp, completely dormant body is. My 188 pounds of me walking around is not the same as me unconscious or dead.
I mean, if you've ever had to move around a passed out friend at a party and try to get him on the couch, you're getting kind of close to how hard it is to move something that's human sized and inert.
I was in a fraternity, so I'm familiar both moving and being the guy moved. But you talk about escape in your book. Is post-fight something that is also addressed?
We'll address it in kind of the introductory notes and things like that about when we're talking about the reasons to avoid a fight. But this book is very specifically about the skills in particular. There's people who've written much better books about the reasons to avoid the fight. Mark McYoung's In the Name of Self-Defense and Safety Doesn't Have to Be Scary both go deeply into that at a level that I'm not qualified to do anyway. The escape is about literally avoiding injury through rapid flight. Stories about just running like hell, applying parkour. There's a story that I got from one of my interviews where there's a guy who used to be a CIA agent and now he does consulting. He carries a $5 bill around for purposes of disengaging. If somebody's coming up to him and he's not comfortable with it, he'll drop the bill and say, "Hey, did you drop that?" That guy's guys go down because it's a $5 bill. His feet go running.
No, that's brilliant. That's a brilliant feint.
Like, I'll spend $5 not to get in a fight every day.
Yeah, see, those anecdotes for me as a gamer, because I don't think about something unless I have experienced it or been influenced by it directly firsthand. I would have never considered that in the alley, I'm going to, drop 2 gold coins, which in this city is a fortune. Eyes are going to go down. Maybe they fight each other. I don't know, but I'm running. I've got the initiative, right? That's wonderful stuff. Yeah.
Just little things like that, and that's the thing where there's a lot of dry books about various topics, but we live for stories as humans. We always have. I am convinced, with no scientific backing to support this, that stories is what makes us human. It's the real difference between us and the other primates and the other animals, that we tell stories, we remember stories, we share stories, and those stories became language and they became the written word, and they're still how we engage with our ancestors and with our friends and with our fellow humans. And we're the only species on the planet that does this.
It really takes the oral tradition and puts it in a wonderful context, but it also makes me think about the value of actual physical printed books versus digital manipulation and what have you, and how important books are because we can share that, Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I don't know about you, but I still get kind of pissed off every time I think about the Library of Alexandria. Right? Like you kind of feel it the same way you feel that time you lost your cat when you were 11. Still a little sore.
Well, and it's funny for someone myself who is by no stretch of the imagination considered A, educated, or B, well-read. I do have this strange reverence for books. It's like babies to me, right? It is this thing that is greater than the sum of its parts, what it represents, its potential, what it could become, the adventure that it could be, etc. It seems almost sacred to me. And I know I'm romanticizing, but whatever, that's one of the things that I do. Let's go back to the subject of Call of Cthulhu. In particular, you wrote a game for Modifius's Achtung Cthulhu and their 2D20 system. So first, I would like to do a total wank about your adventure. And then, because 2D20 is on my list of things I've never gotten to play and I really, really want to. In fact, behind me on the shelves, I've got some Conan stuff. Anyway, I want to talk about 2D20, what you like about it. But first, your Achtung Cthulhu, which I'm going to let you set the stage for World War II, blah, 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 the whole thing. And you tell me what's going on.
So Achtung Cthulhu is a game. It was the game that launched Modifius. And it's basically World War II adventures if Cthulhu was real. And it's more of the pulp Cthulhu vibe than the creepy investigator, everybody dies vibe, but can still be very, very fun. And this particular adventure I was hired to write, they wanted something that involved less combative characters, more science and academic-based characters, and they wanted it on the home front in England. And so, without doing too many spoilers, you've got a bunch of boffins there in their version of Bletchley Park, and they've intercepted some radio signals, and you chase the radio signals. You have some rooftop chases, some car chases, a couple of encounters with mythos beings, and then the PCs find out that cultists are going to be summoning a monster in the middle of London. And this is while the Blitz is going on. So you're racing through London as the bombs are starting to fall to get to the subway station where the cultists are doing the thing. And then you can maybe stop the ritual, or maybe you're going to be chasing a ravening mythos monster through the streets of London while the Nazi bombs are falling all around you. That's the short version.
What are your character background options for this adventure?
So, I mean, you can write anybody. You know, it's a role-playing game, so you can be whatever you want. But it's built specifically for people who want to play a character who's, you know, the British term is a boffin, right? It's the code breaker of Bletchley. It's the typist or the theoretical scientist back there, because everybody who's got the combat juice at this point, they're in Europe. So you're the academics back home who have to save the day.
Right, unless you are one of the elderly or infirm who, you know, is not an invalid. You're walking around, you know, with the shotgun that that got handed down from your dad or your grandpa, you know, keeping an eye on the home front. Oh, that sounds delightful. But then, of course, you throw in mythos, right? So, well, again, I don't want to ask too many questions because I don't want to spoil it. So I'm getting ready to, well, I shouldn't say that. I've already done session 0 and session 1 of my Savage Cthulhu game. And I very much love a Hellboy, Achtung Cthulhu, more pulpy, survivable, something's a little bit more elastic. I don't want bumpers on it, but I want some survivability. I want people to live long enough for their brains to get screwed up, right? So that intrigues me a lot, but there are some things that you have to add into Savage Worlds to make it really feel more Call of Cthulhu. What does the 2D20 system do that still makes it feel like a traditional Call of Cthulhu game before we get into the mechanics of 2D20?
So again, it's a much better system for Pulp Cthulhu. You know, it's much more survivable. It's got an insanity track and you get weirder and weirder and weirder, and you get mental wounds, not healing, driving you insane, and all of that. But yeah, as a system, it's not as good as BRP Call of Cthulhu for that other kind of slow, creepy, Lovecraftian story. But for Pulp, it's survivable, it's action packed, it's quick. Combats are short and sweet, even if you don't get your brain sucked out through your nose. And there's a lot of negotiations, not exactly the right word, but there's a lot of ways that the DM and the player can change the difficulty of a roll by adding things here, adding a die to the roll, taking a die away from the roll to kind of play with the reality around you, which in a Cthulhu game can be very, very effective and appropriate.
Well, let's talk about that then, because I did a review of Blades in the Dark, and I didn't understand Blades in the Dark for a long, long time. But that's really the crux of the game is before you ever pick up dice, the game master and the player are negotiating what does the condition prior to the roll look like, what do success and failure look like, all before the dice are ever picked up. And that mechanic is wholly interesting to me because most games games, we know essentially the answer to both of those questions before dice are picked up, right? So how does 2D20 work? It sounds like you're building a dice pool and then you're negotiating dice added and subtracted.
Basically, yeah, where 2D20 is named because you roll two 20-sided dice for at least two, up to 5, for any attempts to do anything. You've got attributes and skills, and then you choose one attribute and one skill, and then you combine the numbers, and if you roll lower than the sum of those numbers, you get a success. This is not a new concept. But what they also have is there's the concepts of consequences and momentum, and then the concept of truths. And every scene, every person has a handful of truths. And if you can tap that truth, very much like aspects from fate, then you get an extra die or you take a die away. So if I'm rolling, if I'm designing a conflict at the top of a tower in Paris and it's raining, I'll have the truth slick cobblestones. And then maybe if the PCs are chasing somebody across it, I'll apply that truth to take away a die. Or maybe they'll mention, hey, that guy's also running across slick cobblestones. So maybe he takes away a guy. Or maybe somebody lobs a brick at him and says, oh, remember, it's slick cobblestone, so he should have a penalty to his attempt to stay upright after he gets hit. So these truths are ways that you can, especially when you start Cthulhuing things up, the truth of non-Euclidean stairway, the truth of Cthulhu echoing in your mind.
No, that's delightful.
Right? And then when you roll the dice, if you roll really well, then you can get momentum. And momentum it's a point system. It's a lot like a fate token, where there's a handful of things you can do with momentum. And you can spend it right away, or you can store it for later. And the default one is you spend a point of momentum, you get an extra die to your pool. But you can also use momentum to establish a truth. And it has to be narratively appropriate, right? So those slick cobblestones, that truth could be that you're wearing really good shoes, or that there's a path along this side that is sheltered by eaves. And so you can change the narrative in cool and appropriate ways. And of course, the GM also gets doom, which is if you roll really badly on a roll, the GM gets to do these things too. And one of the nice things about it is that the economy of it encourages players to spend their momentum in real time, but really encourages the DM to start kind of accumulating doom and holding it through the encounter and through the adventure until you got a nice big pile of these chips at the climax, so you never one-shot the climax.
That's fantastic. So there's literally a gas pedal and brakes in the game so the game master can control. It's interesting. We're going to use one of the setting rules for the new Savage Worlds edition is hard choices, where I don't get bennies right at the beginning of the game. But the players get bennies, and I freely, liberally hand out bennies for cool stuff and role play and whatever. But when they spend a benny, it doesn't go back in the bag. It goes behind the screen.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So that's something that we're going to experiment with. But the momentum doom system, I know Eric Owsley from Gamers Table, who's also on the Fear the Boot AP with me, he is very enamored with Conan in general, but is a big fan of the 2D20 system. But I haven't really gotten to drill down and dig into it yet. When does your adventure for Achtung Cthulhu come out?
So it'll be out by the time this episode drops. I was told early February and haven't checked in a week, so it's probably up already.
Do you have any other projects coming up that you can talk about, or other gaming related stuff that you can talk about?
Yeah, I've got a couple other assignments rolling through. I'm doing some other work for Achtung Cthulhu. I've got an adventure dropping for Chaosium's new Lords of the Middle Sea game. Did a couple of data Cs for the Gaia Complex. And then Steve Jackson and I were talking about something too.
Can you talk about that?
I keep a couple irons in the fire. Yeah, a little bit, because I'm not sure it's going to go through yet, but a little bit. Pyramid has changed their business model, Pyramid Magazine, and so it's kind of cool what they're doing. Okay. Let's get into that for a minute, if you can, and we'll kind of go from there. Absolutely. And I'll kind of pick up the thread about it. The 2D20 Conan, a really good example of how you can use Doom. In my Conan game, my 2D20 Conan game, one of the uses of the Doom, which is the opposite of momentum, is that you can call in reinforcements. And so the PCs were having this battle against a monster that appears in a lot of my different games called Colony Spiders. It's like ant nest, only a spider's the size of a puppy dog. Gross. And what they do is they grab you, Yeah, and they grab you with their webs and drag you back to the ant net. It's one of my favorite low-level encounters because it's non-lethal, but it creates a lot of panic when your character's being dragged away, right?
I'm not arachnophobic like my wife is, but dude, my skin is crawling at the concept of a dog-sized spider.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, my players hate them. But they're having this fight with them, and it's a big fight, and we're getting out of time, and just as things worked out, one of the squishiest PCs was like 100 yards away over there. And so I drop, a bunch of doom to have another dozen colony spiders pop out of the bushes surrounding him. I say, all right, guys, that's it for today. We'll catch you next time. Dun, dun, dun.
Absolutely perfect. That is fantastic.
That's the power of momentum. It's pretty cool.
I enjoy a game that has really defined rules in terms of what the players are allowed to do and what the DM is allowed to do. Now, I know that is antithetical to a lot of modern gaming, but I have a hard time with a system that is too loose for me in terms of what I'm doing as the game master. However, if there's a rule book and people know that I'm collecting these coins and anyone can pick up the book and learn what I'm doing with these tokens or coins that represent doom, that I love the idea, because I know that a couple people at the table will look at that. Most people won't, but that there's an established mechanic where I can spend tokens to bring in reinforcements or to quote unquote legitimately and fairly change the world so the players don't feel like that they're getting taken advantage of. Ooh, that's super enticing.
It really is. And I'm right there with you where, the story stick games, the more narrative games, they tell a fiction. But to me, a game is as good as it introduces meaningful decisions. Not just decisions, but meaningful decisions. And when the DM is just making shit up, the players' decisions are less meaningful. They're just doing stuff and the DM just fiats what happens. And you can still tell a fun story with that. But it's not the kind of game that I like. I'm not saying that if you love that game that there's anything wrong with you, but except there's totally something wrong with you if you don't game exactly the way I like to game. But yeah, that those story stick games, the choices don't mean anything. And when your choices don't mean anything, you might as well not have choices, in my opinion.
That's one of the things that the problems that I have with how you put it, the story stick games, is that as a game master adjudicating the game, it's all so loose. I get sort of analysis paralysis is one of the things that I run into. A firm mechanical system, I can adjudicate faster because there aren't as many options. But I'll say 2D20 sounds certainly like a wonderful blend of concepts like Fantasy Flight's Star Wars or L5R or whatever, with all the different size of dice and the runes and the what have you. It sounds like that, but actually playable is, I guess, what I'm trying to say. It sounds like that kind of dice pool building game, but fun. Yeah,
I tend to agree. I used to say that Blaze in the Dark was kind of, if there's a spectrum, they've got 3-5 Pathfinder on one side and friggin' Fate on the other, right? Blaze in the Dark is about 2/3 of the way towards Fate. 2D20 is about 2/3 of the way towards Pathfinder and D&D. And I'm finding it to be a sweet spot for me, where we have a much more narrative. It's not very mathy, but at the same time, there's rules and meaningful decisions. One of the things I liked about 3.5 Pathfinder, and they were fun games, but they got top heavy and hard to deal with. But as a game master, because they were so simulationist and had a rule on the table for everything, there was almost a sense of discovery and exploration as you were preparing an adventure. Because you take this template and this monster and this class and you run the numbers and, oh, that's what this is.
Yes. Right? Yeah, you've definitely struck a chord with me. I love the wank of adding classes and templates and magic equipment and just building the thing. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and the 2D20 system has mechanics for that as a GM as well. So you get a little of that. And then you also get to play with the systems and the rules as you build the story with your player characters. And I'm a huge fan.
Not only are you engaged in the martial arts world and conflict communication and a writer for things that aren't gaming related, you're a writer for gaming, and you have other projects coming down the pike. But something that we were discussing prior to the interview was Pyramid Magazine and how they're changing formats, and you may be doing something with Steve Jackson.
Pyramid Magazine is close to my heart because they were my first paid gaming writing assignment years and years and years ago. And so Pyramid Magazine stopped producing on a monthly basis, but a little while back, they kind of resurged where they do a Kickstarter of 3 issues, one for modern day, one for fantasy, one for science fiction. And another one's coming up pretty soon. That I wrote for, I think, 2 iterations ago. I did an article for the science fiction one about these portals that just keep appearing all over the universe. And we're not really sure what's going on. Some of them will send you to somewhere neat. Some of them nobody's ever come back from. Some of them go back in time. We're not sure what's up. And just kind of as a thing you can insert into your broad galaxy space opera Star Trek games. And they're doing a new iteration of 3 issues right now, and we're still kind of figuring out the details.
Very cool. But then you've also got some other stuff for Achtung Cthulhu you're working on?
We're right now working on their book for the North African War.
Oh, man.
Which is really fun.
My older brother, we did Savage Cthulhu World War II for many, many years. The game's in stasis currently, but hopefully someday we'll get back to it. Anyhow, my brother is a World War II nut. He's an expert on that kind of stuff. He loves the North African theater, in particular because of all of the delightful pastel colors that they would use for camouflage on the SAS vehicles, right? So they could hide on the horizon. It's just the aesthetic of that portion of the war is just really neat.
And if you've ever read anything about a long-range desert patrol, those guys, man. That's, because you're out there with 2 jerry cans and a Jeep in the middle of the Sahara, and you got to make it happen. Your truck breaks down. You got to figure something out.
Yeah, with a flippin' Vickers, yeah.
And so we're working on the whole supplement. I've been hired. It's a supplement with a campaign, and I was hired to do two adventures within the campaign, and then I'm doing some of the stuff on the monsters and I think on the vehicles as well. So it'll be fun. And I'm not sure when they plan to have that out, but probably by the end of the year.
Have you started working on it yet, or is this still kind of in the brainstorm? Oh, right on.
Yeah.
Anything you want to tease us with?
So I don't know how much I'm allowed to tease, but the thing I'm working on right now is how you structure the survivability and random encounters and special effects for trekking through the Sahara for days and days and days with minimal supplies.
Any Nyarlathotep, bloody tongue, any wickedness like that?
So mostly we're doing Serpent People Yig stuff.
Oh, okay. So caverns underneath the earth and
ancient cults resurging, end of the world, mass hysteria, dogs and cats living together, that kind of thing.
Any lizard people trying to pass as humans in the Nazi hierarchy?
So that is a known part of the Achtung Cthulhu lore in general, is my understanding.
Of course.
In the Achtung Cthulhu game, there's 2 competing Nazi organizations, both of whom are chasing, like one is doing the kind of the esoteric, magical mythos, rituals and spells and cult side of things. And the other one is going after the alien technology, for example, from the Migo or whatnot like that.
Are they rivals?
And they're competing for reasons. Yes, very much. And some of the adventures center around pitting them against each other. Like you'll end up there and you are screwed if you do not find a way to make them shoot at each other instead of you. Not necessarily in this campaign, but in Achtung Cthulhu in general and some of the adventures that you find, you're hosed if you don't do that. It's interesting and fun.
How easy would it be for me to, let's say I was obsessed with, we'll call him Schmelboy, and I wanted to bring Schmelboy into the Octane universe, right? And so I want to have Schmabe Sapien and Schmelboy and Schmiz Schmerman and all of those characters. How easy would it be to take that universe and cram it into Achtung Cthulhu in the 2D20, you think?
So mechanically, it'd be a piece of cake. You need to make adjustments on the fly to the lore about seeing human beings that don't look like human beings, right? Because that's going to freak most people out. But other than that, mechanically, piece of cake.
Excellent. Well, I think that you have given me a new dream project, right? Like I have all these kit bash dreams that I keep a little kit bash journal for things that I want to do. Yeah. And so now Hellboy 2D20 with Achtung Cthulhu is something that is definitely on my agenda.
So you'll also want to check out then Godlike. I think that's the name. It was another 2D20 project, an early iteration of the 2D20 rules that was supers in World War II.
And that was based on, I want to say it was originally a D10 system from way back in the day.
Could be.
Yeah, Godlike's been around for a while in the RPG circles, if I'm remembering the right game. Well, so now,
and I could be wrong too, but yeah, you put those two together and maybe you got exactly what you're looking for.
It's funny. I went full in on the Hellboy Kickstarter. I was at my laptop one day some time ago. My wife looked over my shoulder. She's like, "What's that?" And I'm like, "Oh, Mantic's doing a blah, blah, blah." And she's like, "That's a lot of toy soldiers. Are you going to back it?" And I'm like, "Oh, baby, I can't afford that." And so she's like, "You should back it." And dude, did I back it. So yeah, I've got all the toy soldiers that I want because I just assumed I would use Savage World someday, but I don't know. I might play some 2D20, maybe do some Conan one-shots with my group and, you know, get my toes wet in the system and see what I like about it.
And I will tell you this, I like Savage Worlds, like the guys. 2D20 does for me what I wish Savage Worlds had done.
And what exactly is that?
So 2D20 has that kind of that faster resolution of combat, that pulpy, two-fisted vibe, but also the rules were a little squishier, while at the same time being a little more restrictive in some ways that I don't fully understand even to this day. And it felt like we were almost playing D&D instead of playing something else. And 2D20, you're playing something else.
I gotcha. Now, I don't want to get into a debate about Savage Worlds, but it has always felt like a different thing to me. But I can see, I see what you're saying, right? Every system has a vibe, has a flavor, and some things resonate you more than other things. I mean, I know people who hate Savage Worlds, right? That may not even give the new edition, which is the most superior version, a day in court. But anyway, I want to make sure people know where to find out about you and your book. So the book again is There I Was When Nothing Happened. The Kickstarter goes live on February 22nd. You've got a preview page that goes live on February 15th, but you've got an early adopter page that is live right now. Where do people find that?
That's right. So I'll make sure you have the link to put in the show notes. You can find me on Facebook, Jason Brick. There's, I think, 3 Jason Bricks. I'm the only one who talks about martial arts and gaming all the time. Although it was interesting, the other day I got a private message from one of the other Jason Bricks. It was just a picture of the Kurgan and said there can be only one, which I thought was awesome.
Yeah. I would have done a deep cut with where they're in the church and they'd be like, "Do you like my haircut, McLeod?"
Yeah, right. But yeah, you can find me on Facebook pretty easily. And then I'm talking about it a lot right now. So if you find me on Facebook, you will find the links. Besides the links, I'm also doing some interviews with some of the contributors, either excerpts from the interview where I got the story or a little story that they told me besides the original story, things like that. One, I was interviewing a Kempo guy, very, very famous Kempo guy named Lee Wedlake, who's his main story is about the time he was in charge of the Rangers protecting the Alamo when Antifa and a couple of, the Gravy Seals were
Jesus
clashing.
Christ. That is one of the best terms ever. I'm sorry for interrupting, but fuck, I love Gravy Seal.
No, it is.
Anyway.
Yeah. So there were armed militia elements and Antifa clashing in front of the Alamo. And he tells a story about how he managed that without violence. But he also tells us a side where he's at a hotel in Florida and there happens to be a wedding happening and it's a mixed race wedding. And apparently some people were objecting to that loudly and violently. And the fight comes into the bar. And he's talking about how one of the guys, he's there drinking with a bunch of serious martial artists. And one of the guys just kind of gets behind the bar, puts this large piece of wood between him and the action, just kind of watching.
I love Kempo because it's very counter-strikey. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. I like the, I love the punishing the aggressor, right? Like, I just wish that we did that more as a society. But anyway,
Now, when I teach Kempo, I always have to get to that one point though. It's like, okay, so he does this, you do this, you do this, you do this. Now, the canonical technique is these things, but at this point, you are crossing the line from self-defense to aggravated assault. Just understand that.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Where a guy throws a punch, you block the punch, you hit him. At that point, he's dazed. But the technique has you knock him down, break the leg, stomp the pelvis. Yeah. But we're back to that fantasy violence.
But legally, right? You are required to show that level of restraint?
Well, there's this myth that there's more laws, specific laws about martial artists, right? And that's not the case.
No, but
there are prosecutors, where if I, in most states, if I make this person not a threat, if I hit him again, I'm committing assault. Especially me, especially a male martial artist who's reasonably athletic, right? If you're a portably sized woman with a kid on your arm, yeah, you can fuck them up. No prosecutor's going to go after you.
You can put a heel in his eye.
Unless he's your husband. Yeah, right.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Like one of the techniques that I was taught that I've never had to use it, but I agree with it, is to, if you knock them down, stomp the ankle really hard, because then they can't chase you. And you can say to the prosecutor, okay, listen, I had this guy down. I was ready to get up. Google me. These are the things I could have done. I just broke his ankle.
Well, and if you're untrained like me, it's the ultimate defense, right? Look, I'm not a trained fighter. I was terrified. I got lucky and put him down. And one of the lyrics that I'll always remember from Gwar is, "We as the attackers have the initiative. Rapidly, ruthlessly, viciously, attack, and when in doubt, attack again." And so if I break a dude's ankle and then run away, I'm like, dude, I was terrified. I broke his ankle. I tried to hobble him so I could get away, period. Yeah.
And this isn't avoiding violence, but it's a good thing. It's a good thing to have in your pocket if those other 5 things fail. I got a lot of flack on a certain martial arts community on Facebook a little while ago for posting every story that ends with, I kicked his ass, starts with, I fucked up a perfectly good de-escalation plan.
Every problem's an opportunity sort of thing, right? I think I would certainly be willing to have the argument that sometimes violence is the solution. But I also think that we are eager to engage in it as opposed to de-escalate for a variety of reasons that are both internal and external,
Yeah, no, violence is very, very rarely the solution. When it is the solution, it's unfortunately the only solution. But there are so many ways, especially if we focus on some of those early stages, the preparation, the awareness, avoidance, where we can see in 10 minutes from now, violence is going to be the only solution. And violence is an enormous pain in the ass. And so we're leaving now.
That's the lesson we don't learn.
Yeah.
No,
exactly.
I think so. And I know that you on your YouTube show, The Safest Family on the Block, you interview a lot of people about exactly these kinds of subjects. But if you could remind us for that, where do we find you on YouTube? Is there any other socials we need to be aware of for that project?
So Safest Family on the Block's on YouTube. Look at YouTube, Safest Family on the Block. It's right there. We're in our 7th season now. Dropped the 74th episode yesterday. We have an Instagram feed, Safest Family on the Block, or I think it's The Safest Family on the Block, because I built Safest Family on the Block and I hired a marketing firm that fucked it up so badly that we got canceled by Instagram. Now we're The Safest Family on the Block on Instagram. But yeah, we're on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and it's really fun. If you didn't hear the last episode, I get to interview everything from a CIA agent one week to a suicide counselor the next week to a nutritionist the next week, and we talk about every facet of safety for parents.
I don't want to belabor the point too much, but I think that that is very thought-provoking stuff to expose yourself to in terms of telling a better story for your game. And that's why I think that there are so many wonderful resources in the world that are not gaming related that we should relate to gaming. And I think yours is certainly one that people should be aware of. So before we sign out today, you were going to tell me a story about your balls.
Exactly. So I've had the last kid I want to have. So I'm getting sniffed because that's much, much, much safer than having the operation for your wife. And I'm in there and I get there and it turns out I did not shave well enough for their specs. So I've got a nurse doing that for me, and she's obviously at least 21 because that's how old you have to be. But she looked 17.
Like to touch your balls, you have to be at least 21 to touch your balls. Is that a law, or is that
18 in the state of Oregon, right? 12 in Hawaii.
That's disgusting. That's fucking disgusting.
It is. But yes, I'm profoundly uncomfortable. And then she asks if a nursing student can come observe, and I'm like, sure. And then this other woman who looks even younger than her is in there, and I'm really uncomfortable, but also I'm on Valium. And so I've got these two women shaving me, and because I'm on Valium, I said, man, I haven't had something like this happen to me since college. And, they laughed like they thought I was funny. And then the surgeon comes in, and he's like this 18-foot tall Sikh in a turban. I just got to look at, but that's new.
Wow, because you're totally out of it. Yeah.
The other thing to be sure of is make sure that they anesthetize all 4 of the ends of your anatomy before they cauterize them, not just 3 of them. But just some advice for you.
I have heard that the smell is what gets you. That you can smell the burning flesh when you have everything cauterized. And
you realize that it's not just burning flesh, it's your nutsack.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, but we digress.
Searing scrotum. It's funny. My wife and I, we don't have kids, and I'm not shy about talking about it. My wife never wanted to have kids, but when the time came to have some sort of sterility surgery, I was very insistent that it be her. And I know this is going to sound terribly selfish, but we met when we were 17. She was the one who was very firmly against having children. And I said, look, I love you. I want to be with you forever, blah, 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 blah. We're married, yada, yada. But God forbid something happens to you and I meet a woman who does want to have kids, then I want to be able to have kids. And she was super cool about it. And she was like, no worries. So she ended up having it that same year is when she got shot, Jason, and she almost died. So she's she's in the hospital, right? They get the breathing tube out of her, and this is our relationship. I'm like, I was right about that vasectomy thing, huh? All right. Well,
and you're still married. And that is a good wife.
She's an amazing, amazing woman. But anyway, Jason, it has been a delight. Ladies and gentlemen, folks, people, humans, etc., whoever the fuck is listening, this has been Why We Game. Our guest has been Jason Brick. Audio editing by me, Brodor. Music by 99 Instrumentals. Please proselytize, tell a friend, share, subscribe. Maybe do some bootleg stickers. Build a street team.
Awesome.